This is Andy Tube. This video is going to be about the feed throw out system on this Singer Model 457. The 457 came in two versions, one with the feed throw out system and one without. And I can't find any information of how many of each were made or even what the ratio was. But I will say this is only the second one that I've done that had a feed throw out. All the others did not. I'm going to explain it a little bit, and I have a lot of slides to interject in the video of close-ups that I took. So when I tried to video it before, I was having trouble getting close to some of the parts to show you and work on them without my hands and tools blocking everything. So that's the reason for all the slides. When Singer called it a feed throw out, basically what it is a feed drop that lowers the feed dog. And the way it lowers it is actually by changing the angle of the feed bar mechanism that the feed dog is attached to. So to me, it really doesn't drop it. It changes the angle so that when the feed dog is, trying to pull the fabric through under the needle, the angle changes it enough that it doesn't come up above the needle plate. So it's controlled in this machine by a 3-position feed throw out knob right here. And the normal position for it is position R. There's letters here on the base of the knob, and there's a little dark dot on the bed here that you line that letter up with. So let me show you the normal position for the feed dog in this letter R. Now you change positions of the feed throw out system by just turning the knob clockwise from here. So if you turn it one position towards the left, you can get it to the F. And there's a spring in here that kind of doesn't really click it there into place, but you'll feel the resistance change when you get to the F. And the F was where the R was for just what you think of as regular fabric. The F position actually dropped or threw out the angle of the feed dog enough that it doesn't come up as high as it's pulling the fabric. And it's for finer fabric, more delicate fabric, is what the position F is for. Now here's another slide. And you can see if or feel actually if your throw out is working by just putting your finger over the feed dog on the needle plate and rotating the hand wheel towards you until you see the dog come up to its highest position. See, I'll go through a full cycle. So it's back, it's dropped down, it's coming up to the front of the opening. Now it's coming up above the needle plate, and once it reaches its highest arc, it starts moving towards the back. Okay, so as you have your finger here and you're rotating the hand wheel, you feel it come up, it hits a certain height, and then it starts going towards the back, and that's the normal cycle in forward sewing to pull the fabric through. If I put the machine up in reverse, it's going to have the opposite arc. It's going to go below, go to the back, come up, and move towards you, because in reverse sewing, you're really just moving the fabric towards you under the needle instead of away. So back down and forward now. When the needle is, when the dog is at the highest position there, if you keep your finger on it and you rotate that knob left from regular to fine, or from R to F, you will feel a very minute drop. It's not very much at all, but it's a very small lowering or dropping of that dog. And then if you had very fine fabric, of course you can adjust the pressure bar pressure dial up here, you know, to go lighter and lighter by turning it to a lower number. Okay, and you want enough pressure always to pull your fabric through, but the lowest amount of pressure to pull the fabric through evenly is the pressure you're always searching for. So if you were sewing, say, at 5 normal fabrics, and you dropped the feed throw out to F for fine, you might want to drop the pressure down to a 3 or even a 2. So that is the way that works. Now the next and final position would be rotating it again to the left to the last position, and here it comes to a dead stop with the D, and the D is for darning or monogramming. That changes the throwout changes that angle enough that the feed dog will not come up above the plate. So if you were doing a freestyle sewing, monogramming, or darning a hole back and forth, anything like that, that's the whole purpose of dropping the feed dog or feed throw out. So even though, you know, I can turn the hand wheel, I can still see the motion down in below the plate of the feed dog, you know, trying to pull from front to back, but it just doesn't come up high enough to do anything to whatever material you have here. Okay, and then for darning, monogramming, things like that, there is a position on your dial. If you go 4, 3, 2, 1 and you do one last big turn, it's going to drop it to a position called, I got to lower my foot, sorry. It's going to drop it to a position called D for darning. Okay, D for darning means that there's just, of course I have the pressure foot off, but I'll show you the pressure bar. There's just no pressure on it at all. So whatever you're doing can slide around right under that. Now some people take the presser foot off when they're darning or monogramming. Some like to leave it on even without pressure because they feel the needle won't lift their fabric up. You know, if you have the hoop that you put your material in tight, you don't need that. But if you just have your material on the bed and you're moving it around, a lot of people like to leave the presser foot on but turn the pressure to D for darn, so that there really is no pressure. See how easy that moves? Then if you start putting pressure, like I'll go to 2, you can see right away the difference. I have to push up firmly to get that presser foot up. And if I go like to 5, I can just barely lift it up by hand about 1/16 of an inch. And if I get into 7, 8 like that, forget it. I can't even lift it, you know, by hand. It's just too tight. So that's the 3 positions of that and what they do. Okay, now let me flip this over here on its back, and I'll just show a couple of things here before we get into a lot of detail how this works. Hard to see up here, but there's a shaft system that goes from that knob down to here, and there's a screw, a hinge screw screwed into the bottom of the shaft system through this Pitman shaft. It comes down, it curves over, comes down again, and goes all the way over to here, where there is the actual feed throw out system right here. Okay, and this is feed bar over here, which you can see a couple holes from the bottom where the feed dog is screwed into up on top, and that mechanism changes the angle of the lift, and that is what throws out, quote unquote. So if I let's see if I can get this up here a little bit. I don't know, maybe, yeah. So I'm going to be showing you some pictures, but at the end of that Pitman there's a permanently attached push rod that goes in and out of this feed throw out, and as it goes in there, it changes how far the lift goes. Okay, so that's the D for darning. Let me back it up here. You maybe see how that is moving the rod into the system. That's the F for fine, and then finally there's the R for regular. So I want to show you a couple slides here. One is a picture from a machine that I did, a 457, but it didn't have this throw out system in it. Okay, that machine just came with a needle plate that covered, that was raised a little bit above the height of the feed dog, and you change the needle plate when you wanted to darn or monogram, and that was the purpose of this. So you didn't have to change the needle plate. It was considered more convenient. You just turn that knob and you can partially drop the dog or fully drop it or throw it out. So let me show you the slide of this system without the throw out, and then a close-up of this with the throw out. Okay, so that gives you a better idea of the two. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you how to take off this knob that's attached to the shaft system. Then we'll go below and remove the set screw, trickily remove that shaft system in case you want to get in here and clean or repair, or you have a busted spring. I'm going to pull off the spring and show you that. I'm not going to remove the Pitman shaft because that's a lot more detailed. That's a lot more trickier, and it's seldom that you're going to have to do that. And I'll explain how I cleaned mine in shape, because mine, I have cleaned the system and I've oiled it extensively, and it's still kind of tough to do this. It's a lot more harder than the first one I did, and then I finally figured out why. So I'll show you that in case you're having trouble. But to start off removing the knob, we want to rotate it all the way to the left to the D, and then you're going to see a set screw right above the letter D that is how the knob fastens to the shaft system. So if you loosen that set screw, you can pull the knob straight up. Now mine was pretty gunked up, and I actually put a little screwdriver tip on there and kind of wiggled it to break it free a little bit. Then it came right up. But that's basically how you take it off, right there. And you can see the shaft. And let me show you a close-up of this. Okay, it's interesting to me, even though I took this off before and cleaned this all out. Since I've oiled it, you can see that it's still more stuff has more of the old black gunk has come out of there. That's interesting. Look at the stain it left, and look at all this here. So I'll have to clean that again, I guess. Anyway, once you have this off, you'll notice, as I showed in the picture, the top of the shaft has a flat spot right behind the letter D, and that's where the set screw is. And again, that's very common. Many times, if there's only one set screw, it has to attach to the shaft on a flat spot so that it doesn't twist loose. And that's exactly the case here. You'll see the flat spot when you take the knob off. Putting the machine back on and then I'm going to lift it up with a block here to try and get it in the frame a little bit better. But it's very hard to see on top of and back behind this shaft. You'll see the forked end of the Pitman, and you'll see the hinge screw that keeps it on the shaft system back in here. Okay, then we can just go up in there and loosen that screw. Oop. There we go. And it's a short screw. I'll show it to you. It's just a little guy. So I'm going to use one of my spring clip screwdrivers. I didn't do that the first time, and I tried to go under here and catch it, and of course I couldn't. And the screw fell down, and when I was trying to get out, it got caught in the motor. So if you have a magnetic stick to hold against it while you unscrew it, or you have a spring screwdriver like this, I would suggest that you use that. Now with that out, I just pushed on the Pitman shaft where it comes down here, and I pushed it over to make the push rod go through and move the top of the shaft away from, the end of the Pitman away from the end of the shaft assembly. Just like that. Now on mine, the Pitman, even moved all the way to the left, does not clear the shaft assembly, because the shaft assembly will just pull out, but I couldn't get clearance, and you can't lift the Pitman up and to the side because it hits the bottom of the shaft. So what I had to do was put a screwdriver in here and push left, put it between the fork on the end of the Pitman, and push it left to kind of pry the Pitman fork over just a small amount, but then I could get it off to the side of that shaft assembly, and I was able to pull it out. Okay. So that's just a poor design, in my opinion, but hey. Now, following this shaft along, I mentioned you can't lift it up and you can't move it, you can't lift it away from the machine, and you can't move it up or down because there's a glide pin in a slot of this shaft right here. Okay, so let me show you that. I'm going to show you a picture of whoops, I'll back up here. I'll show you a picture of this Pitman shaft as it comes down to the mechanism. Okay, so maybe you noticed on the picture of the other 457 I did that had this feed throwout, there's like a little rolled piece of steel pin. It's not solid. It's open on one end, but somehow they squeezed it and put this pin in here. Then they had like a clip washer on top of it, and this machine didn't have it. And in the picture, maybe you notice there's another slot down here, and there was a glide pin in it that did not have a spring clip. But on this machine that I have, there's a hole for that pin, but there is no pin. There's not one there. Okay. In the parts diagram for the 457, it shows the parts of this feed throwout system here, and it shows the pins, but it doesn't show any clips. So I don't know if they're both supposed to have a clip and my other machine didn't have one here, or if only the top one they put a clip on, but I don't even have a pin here. And that's when I realized, when I was trying to turn the knob, and when I put it back together I'll show you, but when I was trying to turn the knob, I was having a hard time, and I think it's because there's no guide pin in here. So when pressure's put on the Pitman, it falls down and it rubs against this shaft. So instead of turning the knob and just having this push rod glide in there, it's dragging it pushes against, the Pitman pushes against this shaft. And it kind of drags as I'm trying to push it in. Once I turn it far enough that the position of the push rod lifts up the Pitman off of the shaft, that's when it finally goes into place. Okay. Then on the way the Pitman actually attaches to the push rod, in the parts manual they showed a screw. I could see a screw head right here where this push rod is attached to the Pitman. But on here I have another one of these kind of coiled pins. It's almost like a rivet without a cap that attaches that. And in the back I can feel like the head of a rivet, or else it's a hinge screw put in from the back, which I don't know why they would do that. But so there's really no easy way to remove the pitman or disconnect the pitman from the push rod and pull the push rod out. To remove the pitman, you'd really have to take this whole shaft mechanism off so that you could lift the pitman up off the pin, and then maybe you could slide it far enough over. Let's see, let me move this. Can I move this back? Yeah. So that's as far right as I can slide the pitman. It's where the end of the slot and the pin sits. And it's only about 1/4 of an inch away from the bottom of the feed fork connection here. You know, so even if I took this out, I would still be hitting the frame of the machine here, and I still have over 1 inch of that push rod inside the mechanism. So I don't know if I took this out. I have the feeling I could turn the pitman like this and rotate it on the push rod, and then it would act like a hinge where I could lift that pitman like this on the push rod and slide it out. So it seems like a lot of work unless unless something is broken, and I'm not willing to do that because it's just dirty and a missing pin and stuff. So, but I wanted to show that. Let's see, here's a slide. So when I was trying to see what was so hard to maneuver this knob and realizing the pitman slide, I put oil up here on the bottom of the shaft assembly, because when you turn the knob, it starts rotating like this. You know, it's regular, fine, darn, kind of like that. So I oiled this up real good, and I got oil on the spring underneath, which I'll show you. And then, matter of fact, let me show you that spring here. Because to get the spring off up here, I had to do the same. See, the spring is sitting on a boss, a square boss that's part of the frame. That's what holds the spring on. It just clips on there. It's got the same problem. Trying to get it up, it's kind of blocked by the end of that pitman. So I'm trying to think how I got it off before. I think I got here in a screwdriver and I pried the edge of the spring up from the side. Yeah. Let me go in with a needle nose now and see if I can get that spring off, and I'll show it to you. Yeah. So, back out here a little bit. So on the top of the spring, there's 2 little bumps, and this is where the shaft comes through. So it's sitting like this. Of course, it's upside down like that. But those little bumps is what kind of helps you get it from stay in R. Then you can move it, and then you'll feel it kind of stop or lock into F. And then when you move it to the right, to darn, it stays there. And that's as far as you can turn it. But let me show you a picture of this, a couple pictures of this spring so you get an idea. Okay, so like I said, mine was difficult to turn, and what I did was I got it where the push rod was all the way to the right as far as I could get it out, and I brushed on the crud cutter, cleaner, and degreaser on here, and then I pushed the Pitman to the right as far as it would go, so that the end of that push rod sticks out about, what, 3/4 of an inch here, and I brushed all the crud cutter on that end. And when I pushed the Pitman back to the right, I put my dropper and I put a few drops in the hole where that push rod sits. And I let it sit a couple minutes, and then I started, you know, pushing it back and forth, and sure enough, a whole bunch of gunk came out, and I wiped it up with my oil rag, and then I started wiping it down with Q-tips, you know, and after a while it started getting less and less until I got it nice and clean. And then I put oil. I put oil in that hole, and I put oil all over this, and I would, you know, manually move it back and forth, and it got better. It did get better, you know. And then I reassembled everything, but it's still a lot harder to turn that knob than the other, you know, I don't remember that on the other 457 with feed throwout. It just seemed like, you know, I could just turn the knob like click to fine, click to darn, and so forth. It just kind of, you know, it was more doable, and this is a lot more resistance. So anyway, let me show you how I put it back. It's just kind of tight quarters and a little tricky because you can't get that forked end of this Pitman out of the way. Let me show you a picture of the boss in there, so you'll see what I'm talking about when I say boss. And boss is just like a protrusion that sticks up above a plane. So you could have a boss of you know, boulders or rocks or something like that, and this is just kind of it's part of the cast aluminum, and it's just a square piece that sits up, so you can push the spring on it, and the spring kind of holds itself against the boss. And then of course we'll put this back in through it, which will also then keep the spring in place when we go up and put the knob on top. But it's a little tricky to get this spring in here, but I took it out because there was all dried up gunk underneath it and all around it and so forth, so I took it out to clean it. Put it back in, and it's I'm not sure. Here's how I did it. One end, because I didn't look that close at it before I pulled it off. The hole is not directly in the center, okay? There's a wider part of metal here and a thinner part of metal. So the hole's not exactly in the center. And I just wasn't sure from looking at it what was what. You know? I was like, that's kind of weird. But what I did, looking at the boss, was I decided to put the thinner side of the hole up. Oh, when I was doing this, I had an epiphany. I remembered, I looked down and saw my magnet stick, and that's what I did. I put that clip on the end of the magnet stick, and I put it up as best I could on the boss and angled it so the end of that clip would slip under the Pitman fork. And then once it got around that Pitman, I just pushed it a little more and it slipped right on to the boss. So let me show you a picture of it sitting on the boss. Once I got it sitting on the boss, I used the barbecue stick to center the hole in the spring onto the hole in the shaft, in the boss, the shaft hole. Let me just slip it up a little bit. Yep. Okay, so with that, now we're back to putting the shaft assembly back, and they call it a shaft assembly. I don't know if this doesn't really disassemble, but it's best to put the screw hole to the right, because you have to move that fork left to get this curved end past the Pitman, like that. Then you can push it on up into the hole in the boss. But the Pitman kind of partially covers this area right here. But you can get the shaft started up into the hole, okay, and you can push it part way in. But again, the only way I knew to do this was to pry with the screwdriver to move that fork over a little bit and get that Pitman, or the shaft assembly, past the Pitman, because at one point they get equal. When they're side by side, then I can pull the Pitman this way. Man, it's tough though, isn't it? You'll see if you do this. There, now it popped off the edge of the shaft assembly, and the Pitman is covering it now, but the shaft assembly is all the way up in that hole through the boss, and that's what you need. It's got to be all the way up there. Now if you move the Pitman assembly to the right, just manually push it over, that forked end will end up right over the screw hole for the hinge screw, and you can put that back in. So let me guide that in there and see if I can get it started, the threading started and down in there. And then, since these type of screwdrivers are not made, or mine aren't anyway, to really do the final tightening, I'll just put a regular screwdriver in there and turn that screw about the last 1/32 of an inch. So there we go. Let's make sure that that shaft assembly is all the way up in the boss hole, and then we'll turn the machine back up and we'll get the knob back on there. Then we can test it. So we should be right back to where we started after we took the knob off, with the flat spot facing the little black dot on the machine. Okay. With the bottom all reassembled and the shaft assembly up here, I'm going to put the knob back on it, but you see how it drops down a little bit from the weight. So of course you turn it back to the D where the set screw is, and you put it on there, And what I'm going to do is I'm going to lift up the machine a little bit and put a block under this end so I can put my finger up in there. Maybe. Can I get up there against that? No, I'm not going to be able to reach the shaft that way. So I guess I will lay it on its back and turn it sideways like that. So my set screw, set screw is facing up, and I can get in here with a push stick or something else. There we go. I don't know if you could quite see that move up. See, it's not quite up flush. So what I would, yeah, there, see, I just moved it up a little bit. What I would try and do is push that shaft assembly up against the boss and the spring, like that, and then just gently push the knob down to meet it. You don't want to pinch them real hard together or anything like that, because then you might get binding right up in there. So just pushing them together so there's not too much play. A little bit of play will be fine. I'm not going to mind a little bit of play, because that's, you know, that Pitman shaft isn't the isn't the best engineered thing Singer ever did. Okay, let's see now how this thing operates. How it turns here. If, like before, it's still, yeah, going from regular to fine isn't too bad, but going from fine the rest of the way, it's really kind of hesitating. And that's what I meant about missing this guide pin down here. I want to show you what happens. Hopefully it'll show up here. As I try and turn it, instead of the shaft moving horizontally on the guide pin, it kind of pushes it down against this shaft. See how it, let's see if I can get any closer at all here. Can you see how it kind of falls down there? And then when I'm coming back, it's not as bad, but when I try and go full, move it horizontally to the left, it just falls right down on that shaft, and it's really hard to get it started moving. So before, I looked at this pin to see if I could kind of pull it out, and it wasn't easy. And I said, well, it's like this rolled piece of hollow steel, just a flat piece of steel rolled up, and it's got the slit down one side, and they must be able to crimp it together and push it in there. So I'm thinking, even if I got it out, how would I get it back in? And this one, as I said before, is just missing, you know, the place where it goes in there. So I could probably try and find a small machine screw about 1.5 inches long or so to screw into the aluminum, kind of threading, you know, a self-tapping screw that kinds of thread in. What I found was just a little box nail in my junk drawer, and I put it in temporarily to see if that made turning the knob and moving this easier. And I just tapped it in with my little 2-ounce jeweler's hammer. It's kind of weird tapping around. It's a little sturdier. Let's see what happens now when I turn this. Yeah, see, now it does slide a lot easier. Okay, because it's not dragging on the shaft down here. So if I go back and I put some oil on the push rod on either side, and if I go up where the bottom of that shaft where it spins like this and put a little oil up there again, and this sticks out a lot farther. Whoops, sorry, move the camera. This sticks up a lot higher right now than the push pin, but it's well inside the line of the pulleys, so it's not going to interfere with the oil pan or anything like that. And I think I would look for a machine screw or a self-tapping metal screw that's a little bit bigger diameter than this, that would be like kind of a snug fit, and then I could screw it in and it would hold. And I think this is an 1.5 inch nail, so I think 1.25 inches would be enough. But I need to find something more permanent, but I easily determined that having something in there through that slot for the Pitman to be guided along horizontally instead of falling down against here and dragging, it did make the knob easier to turn. So I didn't get a chance this week to go up to the hardware store and look for something. I don't have any smaller machine screws like that right now, but I think that would be how I attempted to fix that. If you had some kind of a, I don't know, a thicker nail, and you wanted to cut it with your wire cutters and tap it in there, just don't tap too hard or you could ruin your bed and stuff. But I think some kind of a guide pin is going to work much better. And as far as the missing clip washer up here, when I was turning this before, I don't see that it wants to push up this way or push down. So I don't think really a clip here. If I can find one, I'll probably go ahead and do it. But I don't see that as important as I definitely want to put a guide pin or a little screw it can slide along something down here. Okay, and again, I would oil up there on the shaft assembly, and I would oil both sides of this push rod, with it all the way to the right. You can put some oil along here and then oil in the hole. And then if you turn the knob and push that push rod all the way through, the end of that push rod, it's a kind of a tapered end there, pushes through, and I put a couple drops of oil there, and then it did work a lot smoother. It's just not the best designed system when I compare it like to the 401, 403, 404 slant needles, or the 500 series Rocketeer, Slant-O-Matics, and some others that have the lift lever over here. That's a lot heavier duty, smoother working system, but it works fine. And if you are the type of sewist who can use that feature, then you definitely would want to look for a 457 or other machine like this that has that, because it does work, and it is quicker than the ones where you take off the needle plate, and there's a needle plate that is built up higher under here, so it just lifts up higher and has your fabric up higher as it goes over the feed dog. But that is either regular position feed dog or darning. The feed dog can't do anything to move it when you have that that kind of feed cover plate, it's called. Whereas this does have that more middle position of fine. So if you just want to lower the feed dog a little bit but still use it on finer material, you have the option with this system. That's going to wrap up this video of the feed throwout system of a Singer Model 457. I hope that that gives you an idea about how it works and what the parts are like, in case you ever have to deal with anything about that. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope you come back and watch another video on my channel. Take care.